What's up everybody? So I just finished part 3 of the Hero of Ages, and typically so far in this trilogy, part 3 kind of signifies the end of this setup, and part 4 is really where the big things start to go down, and the Sanderlaunch, I think the fans call it, where Brandon Sanderson really creates this avalanche of things that occur with more and more significance to the story, and we're just on the precipice of that now. So it's a perfect time to stop, explain what's happened, and loads has happened, and what I think might happen going forwards as well. So let's jump into it. So the very first thing I read about in this section is about how feruchemy is balance. It's what you put in is what you get out, and I did talk about that in the last couple of videos. That's something that I guessed, and I don't think that's just me. I think it was quite obvious that feruchemy is like the balanced power in between allomancy and hemalurgy. And what this means is that we need to find a feruchemy solution to the ruin and preservation problem realistically. And do I know what that's going to be? No. For a little while I was thinking maybe they go back into the well. Maybe the well has some kind of balanced properties to it. I don't really know exactly how that would work, but they were both in the well at one point. It seemed to be like a decent solution, even though Ruin was able to get out and whisper. So maybe it's not a decent solution. I don't know what the solution is going to be, but I know that Sazed is going to be heavily involved, because as far as I know, if I think that feruchemy is going to be the answer in some way, Sazed is the final feruchemist, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think anybody else alive. No, as far as we know, Sazed is the final feruchemist, which means he must be heavily involved with this either solution or what I think is going to be like a third god or a third force that is really like the connector between these two that will make them yin and yang rather than opposing forces. So I don't know how, but Sazed is definitely going to be involved in the ending. But really, we knew that anyway. Like, he's been a real main character throughout, so it'd be strange if he wasn't. And he's in a bit of a personal crisis right now with his religions, and it's impossible for him not to be heavily involved at the end. But I just feel like he's going to be key to unlocking this force, which gives us a solution to ruin and preservation. If we get a solution, I very much hope we do. We must do, right? It's going to be the last book. So I think it's going to be Sazed. And the biggest bit of information that's given out, I think, in this section is about hemalurgy. And we were already learning quite a lot about it, but now we know that if you drive a spike into somebody, obviously depending on the metal, depending on where you stab them, depending on how long it's in the spike for, whether it goes directly into the person, where in the person it goes, but regardless, there will be a transfer of power. And we also find out so many things are made with this, but I'm going to get into that in a minute. So this links to pretty much everything, and this book really is about hemalurgy, and I think that's what the final section is going to be all about as well. The first was allomancy / feruchemy, I suppose. The second one was a lot more feruchemy, a lot more of Sazed, a lot more of him using those abilities, and then this one is very much hemalurgic, if that's a word, focused. So now I know about hemalurgy and how it works. Could we get a sacrifice, and a willing sacrifice rather than all these other sacrifices? Because the only way to push these powers into somebody else is with a death, right? As far as I'm aware, it seems like there has to be a death. But it was also mentioned that if someone was already really powerful and then they were given extra powers, it like amplifies everything. So which of our characters is selfless enough to sacrifice himself or herself? But in this case, it is going to be himself. I would guess maybe Elend would be willing to sacrifice himself. Maybe they realize they can't defeat whatever they need to defeat, most likely Ruin, maybe in like a physical form, and he decides to hemalurgically do himself into maybe an unconscious Vin or something below him as a last ditch effort. And because he's already so powerful, and because it would go directly into her, then she would become a beast. Is that going to happen? Obviously, I don't know. These are just predictions, but he is definitely the kind of guy who would sacrifice himself. Like, he's had this big development arc. He was an idealist and then more of a realist, but you know he's that idealist at heart. You know he's willing to sacrifice. You know he trusts Vin. So I can see something along those lines happening. Or maybe it's the other way around, but Vin is a good person. But it has to be Elend, I think, if there's going to be a sacrifice going down. Something that absolutely has made me lose a lot of hope in the storyline, from a hero's perspective, is we join Marsh on a mission where Ruin takes control of him and he puts a spike, I believe it's Hemalurgic, into, I can't remember his name, but the person who was left behind to run the capital. And what that means is Ruin now, it doesn't have a hold over him completely, I don't think, but can now whisper to him. And this got me thinking and wondering how many people have that spike inside of them. And I have a suspicion it's loads. And there's a lot of people, like, I know Vin already does. I know her earring is one. I know for a fact. And like, it has to be. It's so strange that she keeps on hearing REEN's voice, even though he's been dead. And it's not even like what she remembers him saying. It's like new stuff in his voice. REEN, Ruin, pretty similar names. So did she ever have a brother? Yeah, of course. She must have had a brother, right? You can't just make up those memories. But the earring, her mum killing her sister, her mum hearing the voices is a bit mad. Her mum killed her sister, which is, I just realised, is how hemalurgic spikes are made. Did her mum kill her sister? Did her sister have abilities? Did her sister have the same dad as her? I don't know. I'd have to go back and do a lot of rereading to figure that out. But obviously, like, her mum just wasn't insane. That's not just part of the story. So that has to add up somewhere. So maybe her mum wasn't trying to kill her. Maybe her mum was trying to save her or something like that. But it would make sense that her sister had abilities and then the hemalurgic spike was stabbed from her, maybe. I don't know. It's all a bit mad at this point, but maybe. She definitely has the spike. So anyway, back to my first point. I know a lot of people have Ruin's spike inside of them because it just adds up completely. One person I will be so sad that if they do have the spike inside of them is Spook. And the reason I'll be so sad is because it adds up. And Spook has been my favorite character of this book. But he could be listening to Ruin. Because, again, I'd have to go back and read the scene because Sanderson doesn't give you the clues you need as it's happening. It's always something happens, there's some minor clues, but it's impossible to get the answers from those clues because not enough information has been revealed. And then later on the information is revealed and you'd be like, man, I'd have to go back and reread it to check, which is, obvious. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about. That's obvious. That's author 101. You don't put the obvious clues at the start. Anyway, basically, when he was in there and he saw Kelsier, which could be Ruin, which is really sad, it was like a dire situation. So could there have been he was gravely injured as far as I can remember anyway, and in a burning building. So could someone have slipped a spike into him at that point? Definitely. Did he then get extra allomantic powers, which is something that happens when someone puts hemalurgic spike into you? Yes. Is he now hearing voices? Yes. He thinks they're Kelsiers, but I have a big suspicion that they're Ruins. And that would be so sad. So why would Ruin want to overthrow the citizen? Just for craziness, I suppose, to keep the characters busy, to make sure that nobody stabilizes their forces over there. I pray that it's not Ruin that's inside of Spook, because I'll be so sad, because it's giving him some good advice. But then Kelsier keeps saying things like, kill them. And like, that's such a Ruin. It's going to be Ruin, isn't it? It's going to be Ruin. That's so sad. And what's crazy is I think that Sazed is going to snap out of his stupor because of the survivor of the flames. I think it's going to show him how simple men can become gods and how all religions are based on a faith. Because you already saw it with Kelsier, but I think this is going to like really drive it home with Spook. Which would be good, right? To get Sazed back on board, to get him believing. But if it's all part of Ruin's plan, if Ruin is actually the one driving Spook, then this can only be a bad thing. It's really starting to seem like Ruin is undefeatable, which obviously isn't true because the Lord Ruler seemed undefeatable. But to be able to see everything other than what someone's thinking is insane. You can play 4D chess when everyone else is barely playing checkers, you know, which is wild. And what I think is also upsetting is that Spook has to die regardless, because if he really is to become the survivor of the flames and become a martyr like Kelsier was, then he has to die. Kelsier set out the blueprint for how you finish with a flourish all of the fame that he has, all the notoriety, and all of the banked emotions he has with the people in that city. How to kick him into a frenzy is you die. So I think we might be seeing the end of Spook here as well, which would be so sad. If REEN is running all of this and he has Spook, and it's all gonna make Sazed believe again, just for REEN to have masterminded this, and maybe Sazed does something silly because of it, like, it's gonna be frustrating. It's gonna be frustrating. Maybe it is Kelsier, but I don't think so. We also find out about the Koloss and the Kandra. It was interesting, but we also knew that something like that had to be how the Kandra and how the Koloss came about. What that does do is open up a lot for the Cosmere in the future. It's interesting because we're told how the spikes going in certain places, different metals being stabbed through the person with the allomantic powers or a human in the first place, and how that comes about. It shows diversity, and it also shows that there's so much more to come from the Cosmere, because if the Lord Ruler in 1,000 years only managed to make those 2 or 3 different types of servant, well, 3 Inquisitors, Kandra and Koloss, it just shows that with different combinations, maybe completely different beings are being able to be made. So it just means that there's so much more to come from the Cosmere. But we knew that anyway, but it is interesting. And on the back of that, we see Tensoon become one of the most powerful Kandra alive because he has 2 rods. Could he get more rods? I guess so. I feel like he probably will. But he needs Vin, and that brings me on to Vin's storyline, and I have some ideas. I think Vin's in trouble here. So with that, we talk about Vin, and here's what I think. So I think that the only other person who's playing 4D chess other than REEN is Yeoman. So I would guess that Yeoman actually has a spike in him somehow, because he burns atium, and we know he's not a Mistborn, so maybe he has a spike that allowed him to burn some atium or use the properties of atium, maybe an atium spike somehow. And he's just doing everything perfectly. Like, he's absolutely crushing Ellen and Vin in every move they make. And now he's trapped Vin in the cache, and REEN appears. I don't think that is REEN. It must be a Kandra or REEN somehow. Maybe a physical representation of REEN. It has to be, because I've been saying for videos and videos and videos, REEN may have been her brother at one point, but like the earring, the voice she hears as REEN, that is REEN. I'm certain that's REEN. So this REEN figure is either a Kandra, and the goal of the Kandra is to confuse her and to make her unaware, but it more likely has to be REEN, like a physical representation of REEN. It pretty much has to be, right? Which is great, because we're getting an end game now, which would also be crazy. But if REEN can manifest itself as a physical being and a Mistborn, then why can't preservation make more of an impact on the world? Why can't preservation be physical and right there? Because I would guess that Yeoman's Mistborn would be that figure, which means it can't be a Kandra, because Kandras can't have those powers, which means it has to be REEN, right? I don't know, it's a big call. We'll see in literally the next chapter. But I still think that Vin is maybe going to get turned. I think she's going to get turned to the dark side, so to speak, because the next chapter is called The Beautiful Destroyer. The way Vin fights is beautiful. I think that she's going to get turned. And then maybe Tensoon turns her back. I think Tensoon is the answer. Tensoon owes her a debt. And Tensoon needs her to go and provide the resolution and get the trust. So, boom, REEN turns Vin. Elend has a terrible time because he's in a terrible situation. I would guess his Koloss get captured. Maybe Yeoman actually is a mistborn and Elend gets his butt whooped. And then Tensoon somehow turns Vin back around. Vin still needs to go to the Kandra and get the resolution, whatever that is. Because it's not REEN. I'm 1000% certain it's not REEN. Even though I made guesses earlier in the series that REEN was still about, it just doesn't make any sense at all. Unless REEN has like a bunch of spikes in him and is an Inquisitor. But I don't know. It's really difficult to guess. I just know that Vin's in a lot of trouble. She ain't winning. There's no way this REEN creature, Kandra, REEN, whatever it is, locks. Nobody could beat Vin though. We haven't met a character that could beat Vin except for probably REEN. Well, definitely REEN, because he's like a force of this entire universe. So yeah, there's no way a Kandra locks itself in there with Vin. There's no way like a simple Inquisitor or REEN with a few spikes in him locks himself in there. It has to be REEN. That's my guess. I'm sticking with it. What else though? We are getting a lot of info dumps. The info dumps are at the start of each chapter now, and I like them because I'm learning a lot. I also dislike them because it takes away some of my urgency and earnestness to discover what's happening through the main body of text, because there is so much information just being dumped out. So it's good. We're at the end game now. We need this information. Realistically, it probably is too much information to bleed into the story while still keeping up the pace and authenticity of the story. But it does take away a little bit of the mystery. But one thing we find out, we get another glimpse at the size of the Cosmere, and the narrator, whoever it is, I'm a bit confused as to who it is at this point. I don't know. Initially I thought it was Sazed, but I don't see how it could possibly be Sazed now. Mentioned something, I'm going to have to read this. It's Adonalcium, and that could be a person, that could be a force, that could be a metal, that could be a creature. I don't know what that is, but it mentions that Adonalcium is somehow linked to everything that's happening, which is even more confusing. Like, there's always another secret, as Kelsey has said, right? And we discover that there's something to do with a void and something to do with a lot. That was just really a bit of a head spin. I don't know if I needed that right there, but it does show the size of the Cosmere and what is to come and what else is out there, which is exciting because I am coming to the end of a trilogy, and I will 100% explore the rest of the Cosmere. I don't know if I'm going to do it immediately after this, but if I don't, it'll be immediately after what's next, if that makes sense. And it is exciting to know that he's thought forwards, and it's Brandon Sanderson, of course he has, with great earnest as to what the rest of the Cosmere is going to look like. And if it's as well crafted as this trilogy, man, I'm going to have a good time reading the rest of it. So anyway, those are my guesses. This video was a lot of rambling, and it's because there's so many possibilities. I feel like there's so many clues, and really we need to start getting some serious answers as to what REEN's plan is and what he's about and what he's going to get done. And I keep calling it a him, but it feels like it's a him. It's just a force. Yes. So, like I said, a lot of rambling. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. If you like this kind of video, I've done this for all of this trilogy, also for all of the Wheel of Time. And really, it's just me rambling about what's happened and making some predictions. So hopefully you've enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe. I will see you next Sunday.